All right, Steve. So neither one of us are very good at this. We had our initial videos show up the other day, I guess through the week, a little bit on Facebook. What was that like having the videos show up on Facebook for you and YouTube and stuff like that? Anybody say anything to you?
Well, people were encouraging. They looked past, I think, our deficiencies and were encouraged by the content. I think by and
Deficiencies
large.
are
So
many, I think.
I agree.
In a lot of ways, certainly not the least of which is these videos. Okay, so let's jump right into it. We're going to have more of a free flowing conversation today since we're not doing really a series like we were on the COVID-19 virus, which hopefully that's been encouraging to people. But so, first thing, I've got some stuff from the news that we're going to talk about. I saw this article, and it says in the headline, Daniel Craig says he doesn't plan to leave his fortune to his kids. The quote on the article headline is, get rid of it or give it away before you go. And then, so the article says, Daniel Craig won't be handing out his massive fortune, said to total more than $100 million to his children, he claims. Speaking to Saga magazine, whatever that is, the James Bond star, and I like James Bond, by the way, said that he finds the idea of inheritance distasteful. That's the quote. My philosophy is to get rid of it or give it away before you go. He said, I don't want to leave great sums to the next generation. Now, Steve, we see stuff like this pop up from time to time in celebrities. It's not all that uncommon. They don't seem to mind having great sums for themselves. They accumulate great wealth. And again, I don't have any judgment against them for that or this decision. But what do you make of it when someone says, I don't want to leave all that money to my children? I mean, where does that come from? What's your take on that?
I can't help but think that it's initially just control. I want to control these things. It says a lot too about I don't trust my children or my family.
It kind of feels that way. I mean, I guess it could be trust, right? That's one of the things it could be. I mean, which, gosh, if you're a dad or if you're a husband, you're a leader of a family, what does it say that you trust other people with your money when you die, but you don't trust your kids?
Well, it may say a lot about maybe I didn't do the job of parenting that I should. I mean, again, I'm not casting any kind of judgment.
I wouldn't know Daniel Craig's kids if they came to church on Sunday. I would have no idea. It's just a strange thing, like why would the guy at a foundation be more responsible with my massive fortune than my children? I mean, if you raise kids, can't they be raised to realize that $100 million is a ton of money? Can't they be trusted to be generous with it too and be wise and discerning? I mean, why are some people in ivory towers somehow going to be better managers of that money than your own children?
I don't know, other than maybe the perception that my children don't want to be saddled with the idea that, oh, well, they were just given everything. I don't know. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of.
It's weird. I mean, again, I don't have a judgment against it. It just, when I see headlines like that, and they do come up from time to time, they just don't make sense. Like, to me, they don't register. Like, for instance, I know Malcolm Gladwell has done a lot of stuff on these massive colleges like Harvard and Stanford and a lot of the big prestigious sounding universities, and how they have these huge endowments, which are these hundreds of millions of dollars that have been donated to them over the course of all these years. And what they do, of course, they invest these endowments in various funds and whatever, so that the universities can basically fund themselves off the annual returns of them, right? And it's like this massive sum, hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, like more money than they could ever spend, generating more money each year than they should rightfully be able to spend. And yet, so they clearly don't need any more money in their endowment. And yet every year, rich and wealthy people like Daniel Craig or people, of that kind of magnitude and culture continue to give more money to these same universities. And of course, Gladwell's contention is the little universities, the community universities, those are the ones where your gift of great money might actually make a difference. Harvard doesn't need another 100 million. And I think a lot of these funds are kind of like that. It's just mind boggling that the amount of money being entrusted to somebody else, mainly because they'll do a good job with it. I don't trust other people to do a good job with it.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, just the thought of it, but it contrasts greatly with the way God views inheritance. And I couldn't help but think that God doesn't give his inheritance because we are worthy of it. I mean, the grace of God's inheritance to his children are based solely upon his grace and his glorious grace, the riches of his grace. And we don't deserve it, but but nonetheless, we do receive it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. And, of course, when we think about inheritance, we think about an internal inheritance and not necessarily $100 million. I just want to key in before we move on to the next idea of this idea that it's distasteful to leave a great sum of money to your kids. I mean, that just again strikes me as strange. It's not, how is it distasteful to leave a vast fortune to one's own children? I mean, and essentially, you talk about God's inheritance. It's an inheritance that's worth far more than $100 million that He gives to us. What I mean, if you can just key in on that word, what might be distasteful? So, in other words, He's not saying my kids would do a bad job with it, or He's not even saying money is a corrupting influence, which I think there's a good argument to be made there. Although, if that's your argument, then why would you have great sums of it for yourself in the first place if it's a corrupting influence? But that's not what He's saying. He's simply saying it's distasteful. And when I hear that word, it makes me think of the idea that it just doesn't feel right or good to leave, a big fortune to my children. So I'm going to give it to someone else. Should Christians feel guilty about leaving money and inheritance to their children?
I don't think so. I think it can show the blessings that my father or my parents love me and are loving me still, even in their passing, by leaving me things that would help me in my physical needs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get an inheritance from my mom and dad. My dad's been pretty clear about that. They have been incredibly generous in my lifetime,
Mhm.
to my wife and I, and to my brother and my sister-in-law. So I'm not going to get an inheritance when my mom and dad die. But if I were to receive an inheritance, I think that being raised the way that I've been raised, I think that I would be like, this is this is something special, right? This is my dad's legacy, my family's my family's capacity here on the earth that we've been entrusted with, and now I'm entrusted with it, and I need to do a good job. It's almost like this is a responsibility that I need to live up to.
Mm.
And I mean, I think that's something to be embraced. I think that I carry my family name. Then for me, the name Osborne. For you, the name Whalen.
Mhm.
That's not just a legal thing. That is a name and a family that a child who's been raised the right way with right values should see as a responsibility to represent that name. And I'd feel the same way about any fortune or property or inheritance that I received. This is I need to do well with this. This is an obligation to be responsible and to do what's right.
Mhm.
I wouldn't see it as something distasteful. I would see it as something honorable, that my father's given me the chance to carry on, because our time on this world is temporary. His time on this world is temporary. But He's given me the chance to carry on something and to do something with what He spent His life building. And I need to live up to that. I need to do well with that.
Yeah, it is, because we've talked about previously just the things that we receive. It's a stewardship and it's a managing. And so if I'm entrusted with material goods or any kind of abilities, it's a stewardship. What am I going to use it for? And we're to live our lives to love God, to love our neighbors. And so what an opportunity, even after I pass, to be able to say, hey, I love you. I want to love you in this way. Follow my example,
Yeah, sure.
and love others, love God, love others as well.
All right. So let me just ask you. I'm curious now.
Mhm.
I mean, hopefully you and I are both a long way from dying. We don't
Mhm.
know that, but would you leave an inheritance to your girls if you died? I mean, if you had the capability to do it, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, I won't hold you to it. This is not a legal, binding document here,
Right.
but what would be your thoughts about that in your own life? I mean, you've got two girls.
No, I absolutely would. And it's interesting that you asked. Just even in thinking through, possessions, there are ways to just it automatically passes. And so you make preparation, like our house, it automatically passes to my children and those kinds of things. And so everything that I have, absolutely, I don't feel guilty at all leaving my girls an inheritance.
Yeah, I don't think I would feel guilty about it either. Of course, I've try to be pretty generous, in my life here,
Mhm.
and try to do right things here, and certainly raise my children to be generous and giving, and not to hold up their hand every time they do something good to get a a reward or a pat on the back, but to just do it out of love for the Lord and a good heart. And again, I don't have. I want to be clear. I don't have any judgment against Daniel Craig or anybody else. Look, it's their money. God has allowed them to have it. They should do with it whatever they think is best, because they're going to give an account for everything that they do on the earth to the Lord. So I don't have any judgment against it. It just strikes me as weird. I read those headlines and I just think, what would be distasteful about leaving your legacy and your fortune to your children to carry on? Why is it preferable to give it to someone else to manage it? I mean, it's just odd to me, just strange.
For me, it's, as a Christian, just thinking through, what does God show or display as a part of his character in talking about giving an inheritance, leaving it? He's loving people who are destitute, and what an opportunity we have as Christians to model the character of God by loving people even in our death.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in a second, Steve, we're going to talk about another thing that appeared in the news this week, which I think I'm a little bit more prepared to talk about than you are. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the next headline. But before that, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back.